Welcome everybody to another edition of Flipped History. Our topic today is the start of what I will call, and what Colin Powell will call, the Second Civil War. So we're learning outcomes for today. You should be able to describe the background of the civil rights movement prior to the 1950s, understand why the NAACP decided to attack school segregation, describe the timeline of events that resulted in the desegregation of Little Rock Central High School, and lastly, number 4, discuss the events of Rosa Parks' arrest and events that happened after culminating in the Montgomery bus boycott. So let's get this thing started. The background, a little bit of a review. Civil Rights Act of 1875 outlaws segregation in public facilities. It's declared unconstitutional in 1883 by an all-white Supreme Court because accommodations are not public. Hotels are not public, railroads are not public, that kind of thing. Again, resulting in Plessy Ferguson in 1896 and the beginning of the Jim Crow South and separate but equal doctrine being established, meaning you can have a black waiting room, a white waiting room, a green waiting room. It doesn't matter as long as they are technically equal. We all know that that really wasn't the case, so these accommodations were not equal. The white waiting room was better than the African American waiting room, and everything down the line was always leaning towards favoring white people. So the Jim Crow South, again, separate schools, streetcars, waiting rooms, restrooms, drinking fountains, anything like that. De jure segregation is by law, meaning this is a long-standing tradition like the Jim Crow South. De facto segregation is by tradition. Don't misunderstand. There is some severe segregation and discrimination going on in the North. It's not legal necessarily. It's been outlawed, but by tradition, they may not be hiring black people to work in their particular job because they just don't like black people, for example. So de jure segregation, again, it's by law. That's going on in the South, and de facto segregation is what is going on everywhere else. These people in the North are not just simply all getting along and singing Kumbaya. Don't misunderstand that at all. Here are a couple of pictures. You can see the white drinking fountain and the quote-unquote colored drinking fountain. Here's another one. We cater to white trade only. Hotel Clark for African Americans. No dogs, Negroes, or Mexicans. And colored people served in the rear. One of the films that we watched in the series The Century, one of the best-selling African American musicians at the time in Baltimore still couldn't even get a hot dog in the front of the restaurant. He had to go around to the back entrance to get served. And I mean, that's just absolutely crazy to think about. So, segregation into the 20th century. Again, prejudice even in the North, more so in the form of discrimination and not segregation. There are all-black neighborhoods. Think about Harlem. There are all types of kind of mini Harlems all over the North, especially in those larger cities, in Baltimore, Washington, D.C., in Harlem, in Chicago, Indiana, all those major metropolitan areas. So, the question is, what really starts the modern civil rights movement? Well, in actuality, it's World War II, in the beginning of World War II, and the entrance of the United States into the war. There's a shortage of white labor because we are all sending them either to boot camp or overseas to fight. So women and minorities are going to get the opportunity again to prove themselves. About 1 million African Americans are going to be enlisted in the military. The problem is, or the issue is, these people are going into Europe and going into the Pacific for fighting for rights that they don't even have in the United States. So what we're going to see is another active campaign for voting rights. The women during World War I proved themselves, and Woodrow Wilson helped force through the legislation for the 19th Amendment and women's right to vote. So this is going to happen again. African Americans should have the right to vote under the 14th and 15th Amendments. However, because of the poll taxes and grandfather clauses, they are being restricted from voting. So what this is going to do by 1945, 1946, the end of the war, is people are going to start to challenge the Jim Crow laws. So in challenging segregation, it's really led by the NAACP, strangely enough, since 1909 in their inception. They started out, if you remember, with 3 anti-lynching laws. They could never get past committee in Congress. They just simply don't have the backing. They don't have the support. The strategy now, in the 1950s, is the inequality in schools. There is 10 times the amount of money spent on a white child than an African American child at this point. Thurgood Marshall, he is going to be the NAACP lawyer. He has won almost all of his cases, 29 wins in 32 attempts in his 23 years as a lawyer. Most of his victories have been legal milestones, and Brown v. Board is one of them. So take a look at this map really quickly here. You can see where segregation is happening. The yellow area, strangely enough, right, the old Confederacy were required segregation is going on. All the way out to Texas. The only really difference here is West Virginia wasn't really in the Confederacy at the time, and a couple of those other border states. The orange states, Arizona, New Mexico, Kansas, Wyoming, permitted segregation. The purple states, Washington, Idaho, Colorado, and most of the northern states prohibited segregation. And the green states are no specific legislation. Out here in California, I mean, we're very much a mixed bunch. So we don't have that long-standing tradition of black v. white, for example, that the South does or the Northeast does. Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. This is a class action lawsuit, so it's not just small Linda Brown. Linda Brown is the face of the case. She's denied admission to a white school 4 blocks away from her house. Her black school is 21 blocks away. There's little Linda Brown, 3rd grader. Look at her. The Supreme Court ruling is unanimous. This is a violation of her 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, and Chief Justice Earl Warren makes the statement saying, in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. So this is the crack in the surface that is going to start the civil rights movement that's just going to bloom in the 1960s. So the reaction to Brown, is change going to be slow or fast? Oh, the Supreme Court ruled and we must integrate. No, not at all. The South is going to try to prolong this as long as possible, especially where those African Americans are the majority. 500 schools are desegregated in the first year. That may sound like a lot, but when you think about the 48 states and with the 48 contiguous states, that's not that much. So a lot of people are under the impression that it's going to take years, and that's true. 1 year later, 1955, Brown, if you want to call it Brown 2.0, is issued. And what this is going to say is desegregation must be implemented with, quote, all deliberate speed, meaning it has to happen now. You cannot wait when you want it to happen. It has to happen immediately. So this is going to lead us into Little Rock, Arkansas. They are moving towards desegregation, one of the few southern states that are really moving there on their own after the Brown decision. They're the first southern state to admit African Americans to state universities without a court order. Governor Orville Faubus, he is very much pro-segregation, and when it comes time to integrate Little Rock's Central High School in 1957, he is going to have a major problem with this. He's going to order the National Guard to turn them away. Eisenhower is initially slow to act. He really, throughout his first term as president, was very mum on the civil rights movement because he wanted to win the election. In his second term, he is forced to act at this point in 1957. He is going to place the Arkansas National Guard under federal control and also send in the 101st, which will oversee the integration of the school. However, they can't really do very much in terms of stopping the harassment and the taunting. They are only there to allow the students to enter the school and go from class to class. If they're talking about locker rooms or locker bays or bathrooms, they're pretty much on their own. And as far as Orville Faubus, at the end of the first year, 1957, Central High School gets shut down because he just simply doesn't want integration to happen any faster. You can see this picture here. This is 15-year-old Elizabeth Eckford that is standing outside Central High School all by herself. The reason that she's out there alone is she doesn't have a phone at her house. They were all going to school together, but she ended up getting separated because she didn't know what time everyone was going to get there. Here's another picture. This is not a very good quality picture, but you can see right back here, this lady's name is Hazel, and she is, you can see, kind of yelling at her. And think about the amount of resolve that it takes to be put in that situation and to volunteer to put yourself in that situation to integrate an all-white school like that. Here's a monument there in Arkansas to those Little Rock Nine. Here is Governor Faubus himself against racial integration of all schools in the Little Rock School District. And here is the Nine with their NAACP representative. Now, Rosa Parks, contrary to maybe what your third grade teacher would tell you, she's not just simply an old lady who is tired after going grocery shopping. She is an NAACP officer. She refuses to move to the back of the bus for a reason. The bus driver basically tells her, if you don't move, I'll have you arrested, and she tells him, you do what you got to do. After she's arrested, there is the formation of the Montgomery Improvement Association, also known as the MIA, which is going to organize a bus boycott and elect Martin Luther King Jr., an up-and-coming civil rights leader, to head this operation. This is an incredible feat that they accomplished here. You can see Martin Luther King Jr., there comes a time when people get tired of being trampled over by the iron feet of oppression. I want it to be known that we're going to work with a grim and bold determination to gain justice on buses in this city. And we are not wrong. If we are wrong, the Supreme Court of this nation is wrong. If we are wrong, God Almighty is wrong. If we are wrong, justice is a lie. And trust me, it sounds much better coming out of his mouth. Now, this bus boycott. The black population is the bulk of the bus riders. They refuse to ride the buses for 381 days. This is over 1 year. They set up this extensive network of carpools, and they walk. This is going to financially cripple the Montgomery public transit system to the brink of bankruptcy. In 1956, it's going to be appealed to the Supreme Court, in which the Supreme Court will outlaw bus segregation. Now, leading us towards the Civil Rights Act of 1957, going to be proposed by one senator from Texas, Lyndon B. Johnson. This is the first civil rights legislation since Reconstruction, and its goal is to ensure that all all Americans could exercise their right to vote. This is also going to give the federal government power over school desegregation, federal authority over violations of voting rights, and is going to be the icebreaker for the future legislation that's going to happen in 1964, 1965, and 1968. So let's recap this thing real quick. You should be able to describe the background of the civil rights movement prior to the 1950s, talking about the icebreaker of being World War II, opening up the door, understanding why the NAACP decided to attack school segregation, because simply it's just the most glaring opportunity. $10 for every $1 on an African American child. Number 3, describe the timeline of events that resulted in the desegregation of Little Rock Central High School. Starts with Brown, then Brown 2.0. The withholding of those 9 students by the Arkansas National Guard, Eisenhower stepping in and forcing the integration. And lastly, number 4, discuss the events of Rosa Parks' arrest. You have her not going to move to the back, being arrested, the Montgomery Improvement Association being led by Martin Luther King, again the up-and-coming civil rights leader, leading to the bus boycott, bringing there to the brink of financial crippling, and then the Supreme Court ruling of bus desegregation. So if you have any questions, let me know, send me an email. Thanks for watching. I'm out.